What's up, everyone? Kyle here. Before we jump into episode 22 here, just warning you of some audio issues. I, for some reason, cannot get the audio between the two of us in this conversation to equalize. It sounded fine when we were recording it, but when I listen back to it, the volumes are different. So you may have to turn up the volume a little bit. I apologize, but this is a great conversation, and I hope you all enjoy. All right, welcome everyone. This is Our Travel Experiences. I'm your host, Kyle Rasmussen, and today I have with me Dave Parker, creator and host of Virginia Found, a show on PBS. So, welcome, Dave.
Kyle, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate that. Looking forward to us talking.
Yeah, of course. I appreciate you taking time to do this. I know I'm really excited for this conversation, and I'm sure the listeners will be too.
Well, we have a lot to talk about, so I know our conversation is going to go in quite a few different ways.
Yeah, yeah, awesome. I'm excited. So just to kind of start out, give the listeners a little bit of background on yourself and how this show came to be.
Okay, well, I'll spend 12 seconds on where I am now, and it's far more probably interesting on how it got here. So,
Yeah.
as you mentioned, it's a 30-minute travel show that is on PBS stations, and I host, shoot, write, edit all of the 30-minute episodes, which is a interesting aspect of doing a TV show. So we can talk
Mm-hmm.
about that later. But kind of the way that this whole thing happened is I was in television for about 20 years. I was a chief meteorologist at local TV
Wow.
station. And I did a bunch of advertising work, local and regional and national on camera advertising. So I got out of television because I was tired of waking up every day worrying about what the weather was going to be, something over which I had no control. So I decided to get into radio, which I continue to be involved in. But during kind of that interim period, I had missed doing some of the on camera stuff. So
Mm-hmm.
I decided to do a couple of small, rudimentary travel bits for YouTube. But so I got a camera and I drove to a couple of towns that were, like an hour away, and I spent an afternoon. I simply told people, "Hey, I'm going to make a video on your town for YouTube." They were very kind, and they opened their doors and were free to talk, free food, all that kind of stuff. So I did a couple of those. Someone in one of those towns saw that. They reached out and they said, "Hey, we really like this. It's great advertising for this area. We think that you should expand this and pitch it to PBS," which
Hmm.
seemed like a really high hurdle. I mean, while I was in TV for a long time, I had no idea how to make a TV show. Zero. Shooting,
Mm-hmm.
editing, sound quality, how it all worked with even editing, and how do I get it to the TV stations. I didn't know any of that.
Yeah.
So I agreed. And just the number of mistakes, obviously, you make. Many of those mistakes, hopefully, you make just once. So
Yeah.
I did 4 episodes that ran last fall. I 5 episodes that were going to run the spring. We had to push all those back to the fall. And I call a city. Usually, I start with their marketing or their tourism office. I tell them who I'm with. Typically, when you say you're with PBS, that opens a lot of doors for you. So
Yeah, I bet.
they're very accommodating, and I like to have at least 12 to 15 elements in every show. I think what I pitched to the PBS stations here was I wanted to do an anti PBS show. I wanted to do a show that I think is more reflective of the type of media people are now consuming, and that type
Hmm.
is something that is far more casual. I think a lot of the travel shows, especially on PBS, typically have somebody standing in front of, I don't know, a battleship that happens to be in your town, berthed at one of the docks. And you say,
Hmm.
"Hi, I'm Kyle. When you come to my town, make sure to visit the USS, X."
Yeah.
And it's the same stuff. So I want to do something that was kind of YouTubeish and kind of walk
Hmm.
that line between what would be acceptable on PBS, but kind of push the envelope a little bit. So it's far more casual. Some cinematic mass. A lot of that is a
Hmm.
derivative of I'm shooting all of this on my own. I don't have somebody working sound and lights and all that. So that's the kind of show that it is.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's kind of what interested me when I was, looking through social media and ultimately found you, was that it wasn't, the standard run of the mill, travel show. Um, I personally got into this world because I like the more, non-scripted, non-edited type of things. I just wanted to see the place for what it is. Um, and so I'm really excited to hear you say that. And how has the success been with that kind of show?
Well, the feedback has been really positive. Um, so that's been very encouraging. And by feedback, I mean the feedback from the individual affiliates. So
Hmm.
they have been very encouraging to give them new episodes. So that was good to hear. The feedback I got either through social media, which we're going to talk. Hopefully, we can talk about that a lot more.
Hmm.
Up, it's a whole aspect of this, but also just people who have reached out who saw this. They enjoyed it, and I think part of that is that I've tried to make it different. Um, is it again? All of this stuff is very subjective.
Hmm.
Whether it's some type of art, any type of media, you're going to create something, you're going to put it out there, and you hope that you're not going to get crucified over it,
Yeah.
and, and it will be generally well received.
Hmm.
But I think it's the quote from Theodore Roosevelt. It's much better to be the man in the arena than you know sitting in the sitting in the stands, or worse, being out in the parking lot.
Yeah.
That's a summary of what he said. um, but yeah, the feedback has been encouraging. So I'm looking forward to seeing where it will go. The next 5 episodes are, I think, quite a bit different and a lot more polished than the first four. I've upgraded everything that I do with this.
Hmm.
That's a learning process.
Yeah. Yeah. Have you noticed? I mean, I think you just said it, but from the first episode you shot to the last one you shot, have you noticed a big change or difference in how you do things and your setup?
Painfully so. Yes.
Yeah.
um, it's even though, and I mentioned the type of media that I think we're all accustomed to seeing.
Hmm.
You and I found each other on Instagram,
Hmm.
and I think Instagram is a great example of that. You have some content on there that is so beautifully done. I mean, there are some fantastic creators out there, and then you
Hmm.
see stuff that's shot obviously with somebody's phone, and it's shaky, and the lighting is crappy, and the sound is okay,
Yeah.
and people are used to it. That's okay. But I think the reason for that, or part of the reason for that, is that we're now becoming kind of groomed away from long form content, with the exception
Hmm.
of podcast. I think podcasts are the things that if you find it as interesting content, you'll sit there and listen to an hour or 2 hour podcast. I've listened to podcasts that were 3 hours long.
Hmm.
but I think when it comes to video and the amount that we consume and the type we consume, I think it encourages short form viewing. I mean, a lot of the stuff that you and I see on Instagram, what, 7 to 15 seconds,
Yeah.
oftentimes. So being able to, you can't do that for a 30-minute show.
Hmm.
You can do some of it, but not people aren't going to tolerate that for that period of time. But I do wonder about the viability of long term or long travel shows in the future. I'm not convinced that that's going to be as popular as it was just several years ago.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with you. It's definitely the trend, at least that I see with, you know, my generation of people. It's, we don't want to spend an hour, watching a show. We want to spend 10 minutes, get the highlights, you know, see something exciting for a minute and then move on, kind of
Right.
thing.
And and it, I don't know. I don't think that's a good thing. In that, if if yeah, I have a lot of interviews. My show focuses, especially the second season, focuses a lot on food. And
Hmm.
the reason for that is, if you were going to go to you're going to travel somewhere. Maybe we could apply this to most people. The first couple of questions are going to be, where should I stay? Do you have any restaurants you would recommend?
Hmm.
So food is always a key part of our travel experience, unless it's something, where you're going to be out in the woods and you're eating MREs.
Yeah.
But if it's a destination, you're going to explore a city, you want to know where to eat. So I focus a lot on food, and I get in the kitchen with the chefs and we take you through, maybe one of their signature dishes. It's hard. You can't do that in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Um, and then talk about the rest of the city and what are the cool things to do there. So I
Hmm.
think that there is a place for a 30-minute travel show, or to me the most beautiful travel show that's out there right now is the Stanley Tucci show that's on CNN. It's so wonderfully shot. He does a great job. um, but I think that the popularity of that style will continue to drop as the rise of what you were talking about. It give me the highlights, I'll look it up later, and then move on to a cat video.
Yeah.
I really think that trend is undeniable.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I would agree. Um, so what was the process like, uh, getting the show or expanding the show to a place like PBS? What was that process like?
Well, I had to go to Richmond, which is the capital of Virginia, and meet with the tourism board to try to find support. I mean, I had some name recognition where I'm from, which is Virginia Beach or the Greater Hampton Roads area, just because I was on TV for a long time. But nobody in D.C. or the rest of the state knew who I was.
Mhm.
So I decided to go to Richmond, meet with the tourism board, try to get their support, basically their seal of approval. I created a pilot episode. I sat down in a boardroom with about four other people with the state. We sat and watched it, and immediately they were positive about it, and they said, "Yeah, we'll be glad to let you use our Virginia is for Lovers trademark name. You can put that in the show. You can use that in your marketing." So that was a big part. And then when I would reach out to the affiliates, I was able to say, "Hey, I have this show here. Here's an episode. By the way, I've been sanctioned
Mhm.
by the state of Virginia," and that carried some weight. So I think that was a big part of it. In addition to just providing them with some not only free content, which we can talk about also, but some different content.
Mhm. Yeah. Okay. And then, so did you have to go and meet with like PBS executives or
No,
what?
no, I just sent it to the affiliates, and they said we like it. Here are the air dates. So,
Huh. Okay.
I mean, I didn't expect it to work that well. A big part of that coming together, in addition to the state of Virginia, was getting on in Washington D.C. It's the
Hmm.
fifth largest market in the country. So being able to say, hey, DC is carrying my show. They're going to carry it in prime time, uh, you know, on a Monday through Friday schedule. That was helpful. So I am very very appreciative to the folks at WETA in DC. They've been a big help to me.
Yeah, yeah, that's a big deal.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you mentioned free content. What did you mean by that?
Yes. Well, the financial model for PBS is quite challenging, especially for independent producers like me. It's not an issue if your show is Downton Abbey. Um,
Hmm.
for me, what that means is I not only do I have to create the show, it's probably at least 100 hours, at least, to put together one episode.
Wow.
That doesn't include the travel time, and there's the video side of things is very labor intensive, because with that you
Hmm.
have to have good clean audio, and then I shoot all my video is shot in what's called a raw format. I shoot on Canon, so it's called C-Log. Then you have to go through and you have to convert all of the video, which adds a color spectrum to it, and then you have to color grade the video to make up for mistakes that you might have, or color correct the video for things you might have made in white balance or exposure. And then if you want all of the video to kind of have the same feel to it, then you do a color grade on the video. So that's a big process.
Sounds
Um,
like
so,
it.
so in addition to all of that, um, uh, I have to go out and find sponsors. You can have up to 4 sponsors per show. A sponsorship consists of a 15-second spot at the beginning and then the same 15-second at the bottom. So you can have 15 seconds at the top, 4 15s at the bottom. And then those 4 sponsors get attached to all of your episodes.
Hmm.
If it's not the same sponsors attached to all episodes, like for instance, one of the episodes I have coming up is on the Virginia Beach oceanfront, and there was a company here that wanted to be part of just that episode, which is great. But that presents a problem for me because then I really have to, manage. Then I have to manage the episode in 3 different ways for the other, or I'm sorry, 4 or 5 different ways for the remaining episodes. That
Hmm.
also means that I'm not able to syndicate that show to every PBS station, or at least make it available to every PBS station in the country. Because the rules for PBS are if you have a series, all of the sponsors have to be the same.
Huh. Interesting.
Yes, they don't make it easy. So
Sounds like it.
finding sponsors for an individual show or an independent show is really hard. That in itself is at least a part-time job.
Hmm.
So, because of that, it is a huge deterrent from people having successful shows on PBS. There's a lot of great content that's out there that will never see the light of day because of that barrier entrance.
Hmm.
So without,
Yeah.
I provide the show to PBS. I provide that to them for free. If I don't find sponsors, I don't get paid.
Hmm. Wow. So, I mean, it sounds like it is a ton of work, and you would need a whole team behind you. So I'm curious, how do you do it just on your own?
Well, I start in early in the morning. I do have a full time job, and then I
On
go to
top of it?
work on top of this. Yeah,
Oh, wow.
and then so I go to work, and then I come home and I edit more in the evenings. And at this point, I've got it down where I can do an episode like that if I'm not traveling on the weekends. I can do all of that in about 3 weeks.
Hmm.
So there, moving forward, I'm sure I would have to involve somebody else to bring on as an editor. But that doesn't allow time to find the sponsors. This whole thing comes
Yeah.
down to fine. I know I keep coming back to this, but this whole thing on the success of a show on PBS, 100% comes down to sponsors, as long as
Mhm.
your content, of course, is acceptable.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that's a lot of work. Um, I can't even imagine doing, that much work on top of a full-time job, and then you got to find sponsors on top of that. So
Yeah.
kudos to you for that.
Well, it is kind of cool to have your own TV show. So,
Yeah.
so, so that's part of the carrot dangling at the end of
Hmm.
the stick. But that landscape for advertising. You and I were talking about how the landscape for the type of media we view, how that's changed.
Hmm.
So has I think it, almost as dramatic of a change has been in what's happening right now in the advertising world. And
Hmm.
maybe for people who spend a lot of time on social media, you know you expect there to be a commercial that pops up on a YouTube video. You expect that if your favorite person on Instagram is doing some product placement, that all seems normal at this point.
Hmm.
But the reason that all of that right now is so prevalent is because advertisers are very, very quickly pulling their money away from traditional media, which is TV and radio, and they are plowing it all into, not all of it, they're plowing a lot of it into digital, especially digital video.
Hmm.
So it's, going back to the sponsorship thing, it, if you if you can't offer them something in that digital space, it makes it even more harder to find somebody. And
Yeah.
there was a presentation I saw a couple of months ago on what's happening in the advertising world. Part of the preface to that presentation was a comparison of the top earners on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok versus the top earners in Hollywood on a year-to-year basis. And, they're comparing the top digital performers with people like Brad Pitt,
Hmm.
a lot of signature names, and those earnings were about the same.
Really? Wow.
Yes, I mean there are people out there making millions of dollars, and this
Hmm.
I'm not talking just about people with an OnlyFans account. Um, these are people who do travel, these product placement, who dance around on TikTok. It's
Yeah.
really really amazing how that whole environment has changed.
Yeah. Yeah. That's amazing to hear.
Hmm.
Um, I know there's some people that are on YouTube now, at least, that now get invited to things like at the White House or committee meetings
Yes,
that to make
right.
policy on this sort of stuff these days.
Well, and I'll give you a really good example with Instagram. So
Hmm.
there's someone I follow on Instagram, and she has, over the past couple of years, has built a huge following. And all of her videos are kind of that quick, rapid fire thing that I think a lot of us are used to seeing. They're all 15 seconds. No shot lasts more than 2 seconds. It's just boom, 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 boom. So there's
Hmm.
7 to 8 shots. That's it. Many of them are shot with a phone. And then it says, read caption below or more, see caption for more info.
Hmm.
She's got about 180,000 followers on Instagram. Well, people are reaching out to her. Advertisers are reaching out to her for product placement. Um, I'm sure she's making, she's getting money now for how many views that she gets. So
Mhm.
she, at this point, with doing the Instagram, is going to have a much easier time at making money off of that than an independent producer with a show on PBS.
Yeah. Yeah. There's,
If you don't have that digital media component, you do not exist to advertisers right now at all. So I had, because I was so consumed with figuring out how to do a TV show last year, I put zero effort into social media,
mhm.
and then I saw her account, and and this presentation from that I witnessed or saw 2 or 3 months ago, and so I came to that game late, at least when it comes to this TV show aspect of it with social media. But I think moving forward, anyone, I it used to be I could have used the TV show as the main driver, and the Instagram would kind of feed the TV show.
Mhm.
That it's the opposite now. The TV show only makes the Instagram maybe a little more interesting.
Hmm.
The TV show is subservient, in my view, is subservient to the thing that we carry around all day, and that's our phone.
Yeah.
People are always have that screen in front of them, but you're not
Mhm.
always sitting in front of a TV, are you?
Yeah. Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah, so that's how that's worked. So you can be, I mean, it's cool. I mean, again, it's having a TV show is great, and I love it, and I love the work and the end result. It will not be successful without a robust and successful social media presence,
Mhm.
which I have worked on now for the total of about 1 month.
Okay.
But I expect that to grow quite a bit here by the end of the year.
Yeah. Yeah. So what has that been like? Really working on the social media these days.
Well, I'll be honest with you, Kyle. I think it's kind of sucks. It's a lot of work. I mean,
Yeah.
it's taken away from what I should be doing, or
And
what
just
I
add
thought,
something
or at least
like
what I
there.
thought I should be doing. Yeah.
Hmm.
It's I have to get up in the morning now, even earlier, and come up with a reel to put on Instagram, and
Yeah.
try to put out 5 of those per week. And then to be active on the platform, you go and you like other people's accounts, and hopefully you're earnest about it, and you like and you comment on people's content, which I do. Then
Hmm.
the problem with that is if you go from zero activity to you're on the platform every day, then you get flagged by Instagram, and you get a message, we've logged you out of your account for unusual activity.
Huh.
And then they suppress your content for that day. So
Yeah.
that's happened to me 3 times
Oh
in the
wow.
past month.
Wow. It's
So that's
crazy.
a drag.
Dang. Um,
Yes.
well, with what you've done, even though it sounds like it's been tough, have you seen some traction starting to build there?
Yes. I mean, the engagement continues to go up. By the way, Virginia.found, if you'd like to follow me there, um, you know, I think can, anyone will tell you that the key to social media is going to be consistency. Try to find your lane, try to find
Hmm.
what works. Um, Although, don't stop experimenting. But the whole key is consistency. And if you post, once or twice a week, it's not going to work. And the same thing would be for a TV show. I mean, if I don't have a show every year at least, and several episodes every year, there's no attachment to that.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. There's something else that fills in that space.
Yes, it's like you with your podcast.
Yeah.
You have a schedule to keep.
Hmm.
You need to keep coming back for, for good, actionable or entertaining information. If you take 2 or 3 months off, it really hurts that.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. I know that's been a couple times it's been a struggle, to find a guest, or I've gotten behind because I was personally traveling or something like that.
Sure.
And you got to make sure I need to release one every week, so
Right.
I got to make sure I got something for the listeners.
Sure.
Otherwise, you're going to lose that traction there if you miss time, like you said.
And I do want to emphasize that I don't want to make this the social media thing, and I know we've gotten way away from the TV show, but I don't want to make it all about growing your account and getting to a certain number. You know, part of it is you do need to provide content that people enjoy seeing.
Yeah.
Either they find useful or it's just eye candy.
Hmm.
Um, and part of that, the long term goal with that is to hopefully form a connection with some amount of people. And you know, there's an article that I would advise anyone to read if you're trying to grow any type of business, especially if it's social media. And that is Kevin Kelly, who was the editor for Wired magazine for a number of years. I don't know if he's still involved with that or not. I apologize. But he wrote a very famous essay called 1000 True Fans. And in that essay, to try to boil that down to just a couple of sentences, he said if you can find that lane, that thing that isn't that speaks to you, and it can be anything. It can be like, you know, I don't know, playing chess with somebody in a unicorn outfit. Guaranteed, there's going to be somebody else in the world that likes to play chess with somebody in a unicorn outfit.
Yeah.
And if you can super serve that group of people, and he used 1,000 as kind of an arbitrary number, but if you can find that group, and they're going to be the group that will consume everything you put out. If you put out swag, they're going to buy all of it. If you put on a seminar, they're going to fly to see you. If you can develop that group to whatever amount it is, there is a ripple effect where there are people who maybe like to just play chess, but
Hmm.
they're also going to congregate and be attracted to what you're putting out. So there's, you know, you can take that essay in a number of ways, but the takeaway is to find a lane
Hmm.
and stick with it and do that thing the very best that you can.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a good way to put it there. Yeah, well, I'll say personally, I've really enjoyed your content so far that I've seen on Instagram,
Thank you.
especially when it's a place that I've been, like the one you just posted. I was like, oh, I literally have done that same thing that you posted.
Was this the one on Needles Highway?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, it's really dramatic scenery. I loved it.
yeah. It's such a beautiful area.
Yeah.
Um, but getting back to the show, I'm curious, what does a typical day of filming look like?
It's very long. I usually will arrive somewhere mid afternoon. I've got the itinerary all set up. I typically like to have um, at least one or two key food slash restaurant items. So I kind of work everything around that. The reason for that is the chefs or whoever is working with me with that particular restaurant, their schedules are really tight.
Hmm.
And once they open the doors, they have no time for me being in there with a camera and tripods and lights and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So they make time for me normally before the business opens, or they'll find that window of time during their off hours. So,
Hmm.
you know, beyond that, everything's around that. I do, I do leave some time for finding people and things that are unexpected. And that's the benefit of not having a crew. Typically, with a
Hmm.
crew, you're going to have the camera person, an audio person, and a lot of times a producer, and then the host. So it's four people. So there's a
Hmm.
lot of moving parts.
Yeah.
And there was this town that was on the northern neck of Virginia. Now they're rebranding it as Virginia's River Realm. For people who are not familiar with that area, it's kind of the coast that is right between DC and Hampton Roads. So kind of in the middle of the
Okay.
state, um, on the coast.
Hmm.
There was a small town that was advertised as having the coldest beer and one of the largest crab cake sandwiches around.
Hmm.
So I was like, okay, cold beer. We're there. So I drove there. There's hardly anything in this town. There's a Dollar General, an insurance place, and then this burger joint. So I go in and I film this segment. Interview the owner. So I'm walking back out to my car, and there's this guy out there, older gentleman, and I walk up to him. And at this point, I've got my camera on what's called a Joby, which is a little handheld thing that you can mold into a tripod or kind of make it into like a selfie stick. So I find this
Okay.
guy, and he's in the parking lot, and I said, "Hey, did you go in here to eat?" So he was from Georgia, and he had, and I can't believe I can't think. I'm struggling here because I cannot think of the name of this town. I'll think of it about 2:30 this morning.
Yeah.
So his last name was the same name as the town.
Hmm.
And he and his wife were on this big road trip, and they had stopped in Richmond, which was about 2 hours away. They get out a map and they see the name of this town. They're like, "Hey, that's our last name. Let's go there." So he had a very very country Georgia accent, and he was all personality, and that was just a great segment. And if I had had a crew, that would have been a lot harder. And I think part of that was having all these people stare at you is intimidating for most people.
Yeah.
If it's just this guy and you're in a parking lot and he's holding a camera out, that's not as intimidating. So he was quite
Mhm.
chatty, and it was just one of those things that added a little color and flavor and kind of made you smile and just made that whole segment, I thought, a lot more relatable.
Mhm.
So
Yeah. Wow.
those are the things. Those are the things I'm always looking for.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. Yeah. So I guess on that, what have been maybe some of your favorite and least favorite moments while shooting?
Hmm. Least favorite. There was one. I did an episode on Winchester, Virginia, which is in the top tip of the state. It's about an hour 15 west of DC.
Okay.
And so I called the tourism office, and I so normally the way that goes, I tell them I'm coming, then they will give me a call back at some point, and they put together a list of things that they would like me to cover, to help tell the story,
Hmm.
and I'll look through those. Um, I will certainly do some of those because I will come at it as, listen, what are some of the things that you, not just as the tourism director for the city, what are some of the things that you really like doing?
Yeah.
And and then you can kind of hear their voice change because they're not pitching the town. They're like, oh,
Hmm.
I growing up, I loved going to this place, and when I can hear that, that's when I know that's a place I want to go visit. Um, but they had recommended this restaurant that that they said, the food is great, people love going there. They've got 4 or 5 converted gas stations that have become restaurants in and around Winchester. So I called the one that was recommended by the tourism person and seemed to be the most popular. It's right in downtown Winchester. So I called them, and the person to whom I spoke, she said, yeah, we we don't need that. And I was like, what do you mean we don't need that? Well, we're busy, and we're doing fine without it, and no thanks.
Hmm.
Okay, thanks. Um, which is it's fine. I mean, no one is obligated, obviously, to say yes.
Yeah.
It was, I guess the part that I was a little taken aback by was she didn't say, you know what, I really appreciate you reaching out. Thank you, because I did preface it by saying so and so with the tourism office said that I should call you. So there
Hmm.
was I found that interesting. But you never know what kind of day somebody's having, and I don't know, maybe she was in the weeds. They might have been slammed. But that really kind of stuck out to me.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
other
That's
than other than that, people, uh, if you're telling the story of somebody's community and you are at all involved in that community, whether you have a business or you're from there, you typically are going to be very agreeable, and you want to
mhm.
put the best light on your community as possible. So that
Yeah.
that really hasn't been an issue. Um, there was there was one. The only other time I can think of is I did a couple of episodes on the Eastern Shore. It's about 70 miles from south to north on the Eastern Shore, so you can't cover that in one episode. So I kind of
Hmm.
split it into two. And there was this really nice restaurant that was in Cape Charles that now has kind of this burgeoning cool foodie scene for what is a really small community in a waterman's town. And so I needed a shot of just kind of walking through the restaurant.
Hmm.
So, I obviously talked to the owners, and they said, yeah, shoot whatever you want to shoot. So I was walking through, wasn't filming any one in particular. I just needed to have a kind of an establishing shot of what it looked like on the inside. And so I did that, and I got to kind of near the back of the restaurant, and somebody pulled me over, and they said, "So I hope you understand what the legal ramifications are of what you're doing." I said, "Well, well, you have to get permission of everyone in here." Not the case. I looked into that, but
Yeah.
she did not really take kindly to that. So anyhow, I just took a mental note, made sure to not include her. But yeah, I have release
Hmm.
forms that anyone who is on camera, who is just not like a bystander who you're not focusing on. Anyone who is on camera, you have to have a release form. Oh, and
Yeah.
I'm glad that you mentioned. That is a really good lesson. There was a chef in the northern neck area that I'd mentioned prior. I did
Hmm.
a great segment with him. I mean, it was fantastic. He really animated. It was all about shucking oysters and how he was going to cook the oysters. And he ended up leaving that restaurant, and he contacted me and said, you are not allowed to use that segment."
Oh wow.
Now, at that time, because that was I think that was the first episode that I did. I didn't get a release form from him,
Hmm.
so I didn't have any recourse. So that was a real drag. And but then he got a job at another restaurant, and I went and I filmed. It turned out to be a better segment. And the very first thing that I did, I got him to sign a release form. And then I found out that before that episode aired, he left. And it was the same situation. He quit. But at that point, because he signed the release form, I was able to use that segment with him.
Yeah. Did you create that release form yourself, or was it? is something you got off the internet, or where did you get that from?
I'm trying to remember. There was someone who was helping me with that episode. Who helped set up some of those shoots. I got that from her. I had somebody read it over. It's a binding thing, so I'm assuming that she probably got that somewhere off the internet. So fancy.
Yeah, that's funny. um, what has been your personal favorite moment of the show?
um, you know, I, part of it is part of it is a personal thing, and that is when I finally had an air date in my market, which again is Southeast Virginia, to
Mhm.
be able to sit down and watch my show come on television. That that was really rewarding. And this was from, I mean, I was on television Monday through Friday for years, but it was like, a 3 to 4 minute segment,
Mhm.
at 5, 5:30, and 6, and then again at 11. But having this thing that I had poured hours into, um, that was a really great moment. Um,
Yeah,
other
I
than
bet.
that, other than that, there have been a couple of people who I featured in the show. Ooh, I do have another really bad one for you, by the way,
Oh,
that I
okay.
just thought of. Um, which was a really hard lesson for me to learn. Other other than that, having some people who were featured in the show who reached out and thanked me and said that they had heard from a lot of people who saw it. I knew that that was probably going to be beneficial to them from a
Mhm.
business standpoint. That was also rewarding. But before I forget, here's this. This is probably the worst one. How did I forget
Okay,
this?
I'm
There
excited.
was there was a chef. This is in the first episode, and again, all of this was a learning process. There was a chef that I did a segment with, and I had the white balance was off. The audio wasn't good. It was just terrible television. And so I had to call him back up and ask to do it again. And he agreed, although when I showed up that second time, I was taking his time away.
Hmm.
Time is tight for them. So
Yeah.
so I shot the segment again. It just was not a good segment. And some of that I have no control over.
Hmm.
So I had shot a lot of footage for this episode and it didn't make the cut. His segment didn't. So he sat down, evidently, to watch the episode and he wasn't in it. And man, he was mad. And I totally get it. That was 100% my fault. I should have reached out to him and said, "Listen, even though I've been there twice, one of those was my fault. The other was the content just was not good. It was not going to help the show. I had to cut it. I should have done that, but I was so wrapped up in what I was doing that I didn't take the time to look at it from his perspective. I was not courteous to him when it came to that.
Hmm.
And I feel bad about that. Um, but he was mad, and there was a shot of a drink that I used in the opening sequence, and he said, "I want you to take that shot out." And I explained to him that nobody's face was in that. His restaurant was not designated in that. That drink could have been from anywhere in the world. And so I offered to make him a 30-second commercial, which I created for him. And I contacted him and I said, "Listen, I feel so bad about this. Here is this commercial." No, I said, I'd like," and he never responded. So that was a learning lesson, and something I'll never do again.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes you gotta learn the hard way,
Yes.
right?
Yeah, that was
Well, Dave, any other?
I'll feel bad about that one for a long time. And kind of
Yeah.
an aside to that is there was a concert that took place in Virginia Beach, and that I was have been looking forward to for months. That featured Sturgill Simpson and Tyler Childers, who were two of my favorites.
Hmm.
And I got great seats for this show, and I'm sitting there, and I somebody sits down beside me, and I look up, and it's that chef.
Oh, no way.
Yes, and this is 2 hours from his restaurant, and so he ends up sitting next to me after all of this had happened. To which I, of course, I apologize profusely again.
Mm.
So funny how that worked. I mean,
Yeah.
there were 17,000 people at this amphitheater, and I end up sitting next to this chef. And he's a
What?
very talented chef. I'd love to go. I've never had the chance to really eat there. I'd love to, but that's probably not a good idea.
Yeah.
But if anybody goes, the name of the restaurant is Adrift. It's in Whitestone, Virginia. It has a fantastic reputation. He's a great chef. I would just from the reputation that the place has and the reviews, based on that alone, I would highly recommend anyone going there. And he's a super nice guy.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing that.
Sure.
Um, any other exciting moments that you want to share about the show?
Um, no, I shot an episode in Richmond recently and did not check my microphone that I use for kind of ambient sound. You know, if
Mhm.
I'm in a bar or whatever, you've got to have that ambient sound, and that's I've used it countless times. It always works, and it didn't work for about half the weekend. So
Oh
I
no.
now have to go in and recreate all of this ambient sound. So when I do, like, there was a segment I did on a British pub called Penny Lane, and the owner, Terry, no, Terrence is his name. He's from England, and I'm gonna have to go and recreate all of the sound of that pub somehow. So
Hmm.
that was again a learning experience. Always check every piece of equipment. But when you're doing it alone and you're arranging an interview and making sure everything's shot well and the white balance is good and your focus is set, that's it's difficult to remember every little piece of that process.
Yeah. Yeah. You got a lot to remember there.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
I remember a lot more of it now than I did when I started.
yeah. um, yeah. So you said season 2 is coming out in the fall. Is that correct?
Yes, each affiliate will run those at different times, but I have to get all of the content to them sometime by mid to late July.
Okay.
And then usually they like to have it for 4 to 6 weeks before they air it. They go through. But another part of this I had to learn how to do is closed captions. So they
Mm.
go through the closed captions. All of this. PBS has strict things on what you can and cannot say in the sponsor spots. So it has to go through that process. But based off of all of that, it'll run end of August, likely from September and October.
Okay.
And
Awesome.
currently episodes can be seen either at virginiafound.com or at one of the affiliates. I'll just pick one, whro.com.
Okay. Perfect. And is there plans for a season 3 in the works?
That uh, that 100% depends on how things work with the sponsors. And
Yeah.
just I believe in the product. I absolutely love doing it. It's a huge amount of work, but doesn't feel like work. And hopefully you feel that way with this podcast.
Hmm.
But
Definitely.
you can't. I can't do it for free.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if
Yeah.
not, I'll try to shop it somewhere else.
Hmm. Yeah. No, I totally get that. And I'm in the same boat here. I love doing this and I want to do more of it and expand to other things, but I also gotta, eat and pay rent and that sort of thing. So, there's a little bit of a business aspect to it there.
Well,
Um,
I did have a lengthy conversation with someone who is in the same boat. They've been doing it for a longer period of time, and I do know that that sponsor issue is a year to year grind. It does
mm,
not get easier, which is a shame because that is a deterrent.
hmm.
But we'll see. I don't know. It's it's an opportunity. I don't. Generously speaking, it's an opportunity,
Yeah. Yeah.
not a challenge.
Hmm. That's a good way to put it. Well, Dave, how can people find you?
Well, on Instagram, it's Virginia.found. VirginiaFound.com is where the already aired episodes are.
Hmm.
And then moving forward, I will be talking a lot about when the shows are going to air, different air dates, different markets. And I'm assuming that barrage of marketing will happen sometime in August and early September.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. And I'll make sure I have all the links and everything in the description of this podcast here. But Dave, thanks again for taking your time. I really appreciate it. I really enjoyed the conversation and learned a lot.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. I really do appreciate that. Thank you, Kyle.
Yeah, of course. Well, everyone, go check out Virginia Found. I know I've really enjoyed what I've seen, and I think y'all will too. Um, and yeah, Dave, thanks again, and we'll talk with y'all later.
Thank you, Kyle. Appreciate you having me.
Yep. Bye, everyone. Hey everybody, Kyle here. If you enjoyed today's show and want more, you can always check out every episode on Spotify and Anchor. And now you can also listen on YouTube. Links are in the description below. If you want to see my travel pictures as well as travel pictures from guests on the show, you can check them out on Instagram. The page is called Our Travel Experiences Podcast. And if you want to share your own pictures on the Instagram page and or be a guest on the podcast, you can message me via that Instagram page or email me at ourtravelexperiences@outlook.com. I would love to see your pictures and hear about your travel experiences. And if that isn't enough for you, make sure to check out my new show, From Around the World Fridays. Every Friday, I'm taking 5 to 10 minutes to discuss one specific travel topic, whether that be questions I get from listeners, sharing some souvenirs that I've bought over the years, or discussing one particular city or country that I've been to, and so much more. You'll be able to listen to that via Spotify and Anchor as well, and be able to see the video version, which I'm really excited about, on YouTube. So check it out. I promise you won't be disappointed. And thanks again for listening, and I will see you around the world soon.